100,000 or?
The ones, all, any cost, but the ones that they would be presenting on would be the ones that are 100,000 or greater. Just so that we have a list of all the items that are going to be happening or allocated for within the budget.
We'd be talking about such as our gas line, electrical. In police, I would love to hear from the gang activity to what their ideas are going into the coming year to try to, cut into problem areas we've got. I think that would be most interesting. I know I sat through a program several years ago on gang activity where you can actually tell by belt buckles and the way they dress as to what gang different people are in.
I don't know that that's what the police were thinking of presenting, but
I just don't know.
I mean, what I had prepared staff to consider was to develop the presentations around were major new initiatives as defined by those first two bullets. If it was going to, in other words, for a budget, for a goal setting session, leading on the leading edge of developing next year's budget, what new initiatives were they going to be pursuing that would require additional funding or shift in funding that council would be, I would imagine, would be interested in. Now, if there are new initiatives that council wants to explore, I mean, that's something that I would encourage y'all to bring forward before February 10th, that I can ask staff to
Either
put some
that or
ideas.
go over there in day two, call it oven.
Yeah.
Well, I agree, I've been a part of these before, we've been out of town a time or two and tried to do it locally a few times. I agree with the mayor. I do believe that for the sake of time for these good people and our time, I would like to go along with your recommendation of these 4 items. Try to keep it, I'm not trying to rush it or put it through, but you do have to try to control that to some degree. And as far as the time goes, and certainly in day 2, there should be an opportunity that we could possibly bring up some other things. Now, you're of course going to allow, there'll be time for a question session to anyone under those first couple of items there. Would that not be correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So.
And there's the opportunity, to extend staff over to the next day. That may hang me after this meeting, but there's that opportunity. And that's easier if it's, at Cane Creek, that's much easier to do.
Yeah.
I second Franco's motion.
What is the motion?
A motion that we do what's listed and also add the caveat of other expenses if we need further discussion.
Please define what you mean by other expenses.
Just whatever the budget, whatever they're proposing for the budget.
We ain't gonna be talking about all of it in 2 days. If you're gonna talk about everything.
That's not right. I'm saying that will be listed, list the things that are greater than 100,000, and also list the other things so that if there are questions about those items, we can discuss those at that time.
So every new expenditure, because we're talking about $180 million budget, so you want every new expenditure being proposed, or every expenditure?
Whatever items are on their budget.
I don't know how to tabulate that.
Well, number one, you don't even have a budget at this time, do you?
Well, we typically we use what kind of concept of a zero base budget. So what, if those items that have been funded in the current year don't get a hard look for next year. So for example.
And I'm asking that we look at the entire budget so that if the council needs to make changes, then we can do that at that time during the goal setting session.
I'm not sure how to even, finance director, help me out. I mean, what would that look like? I mean, that's like a checkbook listing a million transactions.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to there's probably 1,000 different account numbers that show up in different departments and divisions, and you know, you've got just, you know, just amounts, you're really not gonna have, you know, a justification. If we printed everything out of our financial
Some of the things that
system,
they budgeted
you'd have
for,
about 1,000 pages of just lists of account numbers and amounts.
or that they budgeted for, or just expenditures? I'm asking for.
Budgeted for. I mean, every division probably has about 50 account numbers. I don't know how we would be able to discuss that in any, you know, time.
I don't know that y'all would build a process what would be shown if we literally showed you every transaction.
I don't think
No,
he's
that's not,
asking
that's not
for
what he's
that.
asking.
He's
He's
not
asking
asking
for a
for that.
request of items that they suggesting that they want.
Okay,
I think
well,
what-
that's how I parse my words. That requests are for new over what was budgeted this year.
Right.
Okay.
So that's still a long list of stuff.
Yeah, that's still several hundred pages of.
Per department?
Well, hey, we just went from 1,000 to 100, we're making
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah, several hundred, yeah,
No,
but still, yeah, compare it down a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what he's asking. I think what he's asking is for a list of initiatives that they want. And then if you don't approve them, we can look at them and make a suggestion on those items. It's not a lot.
Okay, in February, I haven't met with department heads, so I haven't approved or disapproved anything by the time of your retreat. That's part of the reasoning of, at least how I'm proposing the structure of the goal setting session is before we've gone through and analyzing department level requests and in some manner racking and stacking them on what I would be proposing to have funded. That happens, it may start sometime in February, it doesn't end until March, end of March. And then finance does their magic and puts it together and summarizes it in a way that that you may recall from last April, 10, 15 slides.
Well, there's a point in the budget, and I'm not sure exactly when it comes in. We've had it at the council before, that we take page by page of the book that you give us. And everything on that page, if it's electrical department or police department, and it shows everything requested,
Well,
approved.
that's a
or
summary,
budgeted.
that's items above $10,000. So it's not literally everything.
Yeah,
It's not,
okay.
and that happens in mid to late April.
Yeah,
After I've spent about depending on the department, 2 to 4 hours per
well,
department.
I knew
going
that we
through
went
stuff.
through part of that budget at some point with the budget that you give us.
Yeah.
We go through it page by page, but I didn't know exactly.
I would not imagine that would not be ready mid-February.
No, I knew that wouldn't be
I'm
ready.
looking at finance director, I don't think that would be ready.
No, we wouldn't even be anywhere close on that.
I'm just trying to say at some point, we go through a lot of that at some point, but I don't know what the dollar amount was.
I mean, somewhat, not necessarily easy thing, but just the line item budget of a department can be, put up on a screen, but that's not gonna make any sense to you.
Yeah, I don't quite dig it. I'd rather hear from the electrical and gas department as to things that are going on in the city, things that they look forward to down the road, how we're gonna make things better. Can we run our electrical off our gas system? The police department talks about crime, they talk about drugs, they talk about gangs. They can also talk about initiatives that they would like to integrate into the system. And that way it better tells us a little bit about them rather than sitting here saying, well, we want to do this over $100,000. I'm interested in the nuts and the bolts of each department, not just one.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that every one of them, I guarantee you, will get our attention based on what they'll end up talking about, whether it be recreation, whether it be police, fire, gas, water, sewer, electrical. Because there's a whole lot of stuff, I'm sure, I don't know about y'all, but I don't know.
Right.
And I'd love to know on a current as to where we stand, where they think we ought to go. And that gives us an opportunity to think out of the box.
It's like a bio of each department.
That's correct.
That might be better, so we have a clear understanding of where we are, where we hope to go,
Right.
critiques on what we're doing.
How we can be better.
Correct.
Well, and keeping in that same format,
Right.
and if there are some costs that are gonna be, say, over $100,000, it wouldn't hurt to say, well, we're gonna need a new ladder truck, or we're gonna need a new brush fire truck.
I mean, that's,
Ladder truck.
there's an example of what I,
So that's better on being.
About 800,000.
Well, I think if they did have, let's say the police department wanted to expand SWAT team, then we would be advised of it. We could ask questions, what do you need? Why do you need this, that, and the other?
Correct.
And then that just moves right on into to the staff's budget.
Right.
Because we're not gonna be the ones setting budget at this particular meeting, but I think it could be most informative. I'd love to hear what each department is thinking, which way they think we ought to go, how we're gonna get there.
but that would be, what's up there now is an example. What I would suggest to department heads, they organize their material based on the guidance that I've highlighted before. There's two different issues, and I'll just pick on the police department. Expand community policing and the potential of closing the firing range. So when would that happen? Expand community policing? If it was funded next fiscal year. How does it improve services? Are there citizen interests and needs? What's the estimated cost? And then from that, any number of questions that y'all might have. But as a briefing, that kind of cuts to the chase pretty quick.
It makes you concentrate a little more on just the more meaningful things. I get where you're coming from. Let me tell you, these things are regular.
You know, how the kids.
But the third or fourth department head, you just say, Larry, when is this going to be over?
They're right, that's right, so we.
I have heard it before.
Right, and we'll try to.
See, the police is in, and they're involved too in a lot of youth programs and stuff, and I'd be interested to hear how that's working. I'm gonna be honest with you, I've coached a long time, you'd be amazed how much information you get out of kids when you get close to them. They'll tell you about anything you wanna know.
Are y'all talking, I mean, there's kind of two different animals, what I would say is, are y'all talking about, you want a programming and service update? That's one direction. In a 30-minute block, I would say it's going to be hard to bridge the idea of this is what your department does. This is what we need. That could be a 2-hour presentation.
I would say the police could go over 30 minutes but it would be nice for all of us to know what they do. and I think it's a whole lot more than we realize that they do and what each thing does to improve their ability to do their job. That's my thought pattern. Just like her basketball team.
Well, if you all recall, what we've tried to do during the last years, some of what you just mentioned is I've rotated through most of the departments. I didn't hit them all, but program updates. I mean, about every one of them have done it. We're going to hear from the police on a very narrow area today, in an area, but I mean, it's whatever y'all want to make of this, but if it's going to feed into the budget, I would suggest something more like that. If you want just an overview of operations.
I think not budget. What I'm gonna tell you, I think our department heads, whether it be water, gas, electrical, sewer, fire, police, do, excuse the terminology, a hell of a job. And they do a whole lot greater in depth than any of us really realize. I think it'd be nice to be able to see just what they do, because I think it's gonna surprise a lot of people. And no matter where it be water, where it be sewer, where it be electrical, gas, or police or fire. And, I wouldn't wanna stop them at 30 minutes. The police could probably go at least an hour. You agree with that, Chief?
Yes, sir.
Adding on what Lynn is saying, we get hundreds of calls from citizens, and that would also help us to understand how to answer questions, who to call for certain things, if we had a better understanding of what each department. I like that.
We're a well-run city, but it's not us that's running this damn city, it's our employees. And I would love to know in each one, there are a lot of things right now I'm sure that I could gain by listening to them. And then when a a discussion came up, I'd be a whole lot better off in being able to halfway answer it. But that's just my personal opinion.
I think it's fair to say the manager's hearing, though, a couple of things. It's that in some cases, instead of having a half hour per department, you're saying there's certain things you're more interested in than others. So it may be helpful for you to say what it is you're interested in hearing and having those groups have extended time. And then if you're not interested in certain other things, maybe you don't hear from those. What is it you'd like? Because we are at your disposal, and then the departments are at your disposal in terms of what it is you want to tell us.
Fire, electrical, gas, water and sewer. All of those have to do with how a city's run. Now, that's just, I'm giving you my opinion. I mean, you could talk about everything, but just right off the bat in firing, because we're very innovative in our electrical and gas, have been, will continue to be, and it would be nice to know what the staff's opinion is going forward as to how we can continue to reach out and stay ahead of the game. And of course, from fire and from police, and I mean, all of the departments are important, but that's just the one that jump out.
Well, that's what we're trying to say. What is it you want to hear? This is your retreat. You're trying to, I think, coach from y'all